Hello everyone, myself Rida Sadaqat and I have been associated with MyAussieTutor and academic writing since the past 1.5 years. And today's topic that we have chosen is about end of life decision making, how that decision is supposed to be made for patients and their families, and what is the role of the healthcare professionals in doing the same. And I have a bachelor's in dentistry and a master's in public health. And this is a very common topic that comes up in issues and clinical case studies that we see. So let's begin. So basically, all individuals want to make life decisions based on their own values, their beliefs, their culture, their religion, and their experiences in life. And access to life sustaining technology creates the need to make this decision initially. Either you want to initiate the treatment, or you want to withdraw the therapy, or you want to withhold therapy or the life sustaining technological treatment. Healthcare professionals bring their own set of values and beliefs about the appropriateness of this therapy to the issue. Conflicts can arise when there is disagreement about when the therapies should be used or when they should not be used. So ethical principles basically help in assisting the patients and healthcare providers to make these decisions specifically or based on the needs and wishes of the patient. Legal decision making also includes the use of ethical principles that we have discussed in another video, when conflicts cannot be resolved through either discussion or mediation. What is the concept underlying ACP decision making? The concept is basically autonomy or self-determination, where there is beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, futility, and substitute judgment. What do these mean in the context of advanced care planning? When we look at advanced care planning, we see the clinicians use these principles to assess the patients and helping and guiding them to make the right decisions for themselves for their own situation. Each of these concepts are rarely ever used alone, but they balance each other to guide an ethical conduct of care. For example, we are considering a situation in this case where Mrs. W, a 72-year-old widow, is type 2 diabetic patient with COPD and has a history of transient ischemic attacks, TIAs, and she has been on chronic hemodialysis for past 5 years. Following a dialysis unit initiative to offer ACP, the advanced care programs, to all new and current patients, Mrs. W initiates this conversation with her primary nurse. Now, Mrs. W has strong opinions favoring limitation of life-sustaining therapy that she is judged to be an irreversible and terminal condition. However, her only daughter resists this decision, fearing the potential loss of her mother and wishing to maintain her life despite the possibility of a future poor prognosis. Voting Mrs. W to make decisions which honor her own beliefs and wishes recognizes the role of autonomy, that is self-determination, the moral and legal right of a person to determine decisional capacity, that they have to determine what they want to be done. This respects the right of each person to make decisions regarding their own body and course of life. And Mrs. W's story continues that she is brought to the ED after suffering a cerebral vascular accident at home. And shortly after admission and before studies, she can be done to assess the degree of her condition. She experiences respiratory arrest as well. The ED team immediately initiates artificial respiration in an attempt to forestall cardiac standstill and successful. The moment Mrs. W is breathing independently and transferred to the ICU. Later that night, she again suffers a respiratory failure. Unsuccessful attempts are made to restore breathing, and an ET tube is inserted and artificial respiration is initiated. Now, a moral obligation to act for this situation for the benefit and the interest of others is beneficence, which is often balanced by the need to avoid risk and to fulfill obligation. Linked to this is the principle of utility, that is, there should be a balance between the benefits and the drawbacks to produce best overall results. Non-maleficence basically balanced with beneficence, that is, you do not harm others, sometimes more stringent than obligations to help them, and vice versa, not to inflict intentional harm. In cases such as that of Mrs. W, as we discussed, initiation of life-saving measures may be indicated that is beneficence if there is uncertainty about the outcomes of therapy and how much benefit there will be for the patient. Withdrawal of the therapy would be considered non-maleficence, may be appropriate when they are no longer beneficial or desirable by the patient for the patient and produce negative outcomes. So this is again a conflict situation. So the rule of double effect that is then applied in situations like this is used to support acts that may have two effects, that is one intentional and the other possible but not intentional. So 4 conditions will justify an ethically permissible act: that the act must be beneficial to the patient. The person carrying out the act must intend only the good effect coming out from the act. The bad effect must not be a means to the good effect, and benefit of the good effect must always outweigh those of the bad effect. What is the example of rule of double effect? That you're administering medication to relieve pain and suffering, but it might also produce decreased respiration and hasten the time of death. So this is the rule of double effect where it will be applied. Consider what ethical principle is violated. Now let's discuss this. When patients receive preferential attention or care based on ethnic, racial, or economic characteristics, the principle of justice is violated. The ethical principle of justice is violated in this situation. Or when the patient care decisions are solely based on previous social history or impressions made by the caregiver staff during prior interaction with the patient. That is where the patient's right of self-determination and autonomy is violated absolutely in this situation. So justice, that is fair, equitable, appropriate treatment provided owing to irrespective of where they come from, what they do. And they have a right. Wrongful act or any omission that denies one benefits to which they might have a right, distributes this burden unfairly and makes the distribution unequitable and unfair. Distributive justice, basically where there is fair, equitable and appropriate distribution of resources based on justified norms. And medical utility is one of them, where the decision may be based on an assessment whether the expected benefits of treatment are outweighing the harm. Sometimes an issue is in provision of dialysis services when resources are absolutely limited. So you have to do it. That's a distributive justice. So moving on, what principles describe situations in which a comatose patient receiving life-sustaining therapy has a poor prognosis for recovery and assessed to be in constant pain? Rule of double. Or the condition of a patient with several life-threatening comorbidities does not improve after a trial period of hemodialysis. It does not improve again, then it is nothing. This is still beneficence and non-maleficence, but it is not being violated. It is being described in situation that it was intended to do it, but it did not do it. So that is not in the hands of the individual who's doing it. The intention has to be good, and the bad has to come later, and the good has to come first, and the overall good has to outweigh the bad. But if it did not come out the outcome as intended, then that is not violating any principle. Futility, yes, because all the treatment was done, but it was futile in the end because it did not help in providing any benefits. Situation in providing treatment produces burdens which far outweigh the benefits in providing that care. So the implementation of any treatment that cannot achieve a therapeutic benefit for the patient in light of the patient's overall status and life goals would be considered futile. The exercise would be futile, useless, because the outcome that was intended did not come out, and the is more burden, more negative as compared to providing more benefit while you're providing that set of care to the patient. What patients care about when making these ACP decisions? We are taking an example of a dialysis patient, for example. If they are wanting to make decisions about their advanced care practice, what is the important thing that they need to look at is basically being able to have adequate and symptomatic management and avoiding inappropriate prolongation of dying. That is, inappropriately their death should not be prolonged, and the pain should not be prolonged. We want to avoid that, and being able to achieve a sense of control over their own life, being able to make decisions regarding their own life and healthcare on their own, autonomy, being able to practice autonomy, relieving their burden on their family, obviously, and strengthening the relationship with their family, loved ones, carers, and friends who are worried about them. So what is the family preferences in making ACP decisions? They basically often lack the knowledge of patients' values and preferences, functioning as surrogate decision makers. So written and oral instructions by the patient assisted to match surrogate decisions with the patient wishes are useful, and ACP as facilitated by the healthcare team is most effective and less threatening when conducted in stages. That is, first of all, a general discussion must happen, then they must come to a consensus, and then they must follow it in stages instead of immediately going and reading the document and doing it. The instructions should match the decisions that the surrogate is making with the patient's wishes, and then open discussion must take place so that ACP is facilitated appropriately. What should be the timing of this treatment? Initial discussions can occur as early as initiation of the ASRD treatment when it begins. A general discussion can happen first, where the surrogate or the family should be included while making those decisions. Then those decisions should be periodically revisited depending on the nature of the illness, especially in acute illnesses that can change anytime. So ACP is an ongoing process, and patients have the right to change their mind. Factors affecting the decision making and communication: cultural, ethnic, and age-related differences are appropriate in decision making, and the capacity or ability to comprehend information or contemplate these options is also one issue, where the benefits and the burdens are articulated appropriately. Then the ability to make decisions can also be determined legally by the court of law. If you are not being able to appoint a surrogate for yourself for your decision making at that time, then the ability or the competence of your own and the appointed surrogate can be determined legally by the court of law. Okay, so how can we determine whether the individual or the surrogate that they have appointed has the capacity to make decisions or are legally competent to make all healthcare decisions? There must be a clinical determination of the capacity that is documented in the medical records, and in these cases, if it is not being able, if it is not set as to it is possible or not, then the decisions are made by the proxy or the surrogate that has been determined by the patient and their family itself to make the healthcare decisions. What is the role of the surrogate or proxy that they have? This surrogate or proxy that has then been set is basically designated decision makers accepting the responsibility that they will be able to carry out what the patient has expressed and their wishes and uphold their wishes as well. Then the patient has also expressed their interest that their substitute judgment standard will be able to work according to their own beliefs and values and be able to make decisions which could not have been anticipated previously. What is the rule of thumb in this case? That there is no rightness or wrongness of an action, and it will only depend on the merit of the justification that is based on the underlying the action, the intention with which the action is being taken, and not the action itself. And it will be situational and contextual. and it will be evaluated for every situation so that the patients, families, and caregivers can achieve comfort and trust in making the final decisions and not standard rule. What are the judicial decisions that are affecting the end of life care? When the end of life decisions are not able to be made with agreement among all the involved parties, then the state judicial system has to walk in as a last resort. And in some cases, suits invoking federal laws may be heard in federal courts. Thus, case law develops and informs future court decisions for similar cases. Why is it ethically important for patients to make their own ACP decisions? Because family members do not have adequate knowledge of their beliefs, and they have not had previous discussions, then it becomes an issue. Specific end of life choices that the individual might have. There could also be legal challenges to appropriate care are minimized with anticipated and documented end of life choices. Therefore, the legal challenges are reduced. And the principle of autonomy, that is the right to make decisions about one's own health, is highly valued in health culture, specifically that of US health culture. And it underlies the legal approach of making our end of life decisions. Withholding and withdrawing of treatment, what are the advantages, disadvantages that are discussed? Advantages are as follows: that there's outlining the wishes for specific treatment when you're writing an ACP. Also, you're able to demonstrate personal beliefs and circumstances also in which the burdens will outweigh the benefits. And there is a trial period that is given to you for selected therapies so often, so that the families are able to adjust the severity of the condition, probable futility of further treatment prior to the withdrawing of treatment. What are the disadvantages? May require multiple decision points along illness trajectory, and the family must be ready for patient's death once the decision of withdrawing the treatment has been made. So I hope you've understood the entire process of how advanced care directive and advanced care practice is practiced in the context of the United States of America and in general as well. What is decision making and how it goes, and how the patients appoint surrogates, and what is the rule of law for the same, when the state or the federal law interferes in doing the same. So I'll see you again another day with another topic. Thank you so much.